identifying early on where the areas of misalignment might be. Work hard to gain that alignment. If it's not going to happen, move on. Help that person find something that they can align with and use their talents in a different way for the good of all. So that's first and foremost. Secondly to that is curiosity. You're coming from the outside, right? When you acquire a business, it doesn't mean that you have all the answers or you necessarily have to be right. Paint a vision, ask for the alignment in the middle, and explore the areas where you're not aligned with curiosity. Figure out why that is. Maybe there's actually some validity there. It's something you can learn, right? You often buy other businesses because they have something different or new or whatever, right? Don't look past that because your own ego says you have to be right.
Welcome to the People Powered Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things workplace culture. Let's help you reinfuse your workplace with that happiness factor, a show that gives you the expert insight to attract and keep happy, high-performing employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Hello and welcome to another episode of the People Powered Podcast. Today, folks, we are continuing our workplace culture secret sauce series where we are talking to companies and groups of companies who, when it comes to helping their team members feel seen, heard, and valued, they have clearly understood the assignment. Today, we welcome the CEO of JV Driver Group of companies. Welcome, Chuck Saunders.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Chuck, before we dive into the wonderful conversation where we want to take it, I would like for you to first share just a bit more context on Chuck and help our audience understand how Chuck got to doing what Chuck does today and a bit more about what that is that he does today, as well as a bit more about the company.
Yeah, happy to do that, Lori. So going way back, I'm originally from Airdrie, Alberta, but grew up on Vancouver Island in a little tiny town called Shawnigan Lake. When I was growing up in Shawnigan Lake anyway, to give you the setting, it's just basically a logging community. Didn't have a lot of paved roads, and there really wasn't much going on other than a lake and a bunch of big trees. And so as I grew up through high school and so on, I realized that I really was intrigued by business and in particular how business worked and, what role I might play in my career in working with other people in business. So it's been a lifelong calling of mine. I'm an accountant by training. So I spent years in public practice, and like a lot of people left the accounting profession per se, public practice, to go and work for one of my clients, which was sort of around the year, 2000 or so, where I had been working with JV Driver for years as part of the firm. And I watched them grow from a place in the mid-90s, about 1998, with 6 employees, to a place where eventually by 2000, 2005, I think it was actually, they needed a chief financial officer, and I came over. I wasn't called first. It was much smaller company at the time. But anyway, I came over as the accountant and spent 11 years as the CFO in our group. In 2015, I took over as the CEO, the president, and then eventually the president and CEO. And I've been in the chair almost 10 years now. Our company is diverse.
Amazing.
We started out long ago, 1989. We were founded as a pure construction business. It was a heavy industrial construction business that was focused on the forest industry, particularly pulp and paper. And from there, took on oil and gas contracts in Alberta, still with a very heavy industrial focus. And about the time that I came on board, we really opened up to diversity away from construction, understanding that we were going through probably what the largest boom in Canadian history for construction, or one of in our lifetime anyway. We needed to plan ahead because those great times, the gold rush as we call it in Alberta, wasn't going to last forever. And so we expanded beyond that. We today are more like a private equity or conglomerate type business. We have interest still in construction, a very robust construction business. We have a heavy marine business, a hospitality division. We have some car dealerships and an auto group. We have some real estate and lending assets and some other things that make up our overall portfolio. We operate Canada, US, Caribbean, United Kingdom. We have operated in Africa off and on, and today we do about $1.6 billion in sales and probably have about 4,000 employees.
So that's a lot of people spread amongst all the different companies, right?
Yeah. We have great people.
So when it comes to being spread across all these companies, I imagine there's a bit of a challenge in terms of how do you ensure that there's consistent culture as well as shared values across multiple companies? What are some of the strategies that you implement in order to ensure that alignment in culture and values?
Fundamentally, I think myself and our leadership team firmly understand that people don't necessarily work for the company. They do, obviously, but in their mind, they likely work more for the local leadership than they do for the overall company. And in particular, when you consider geographies like I've just described, or widely diverse operations, that becomes more important as a leadership sort of worldview, right? People work at the local level. They are, bonded to their team members, and ultimately they probably signed up because of some leader in the business who brought them on board that they found a fit with. In terms of culture, to answer your question, with that worldview, we believe that culture is best delivered through that same model at the local level. We have guiding principles, core values that span all of it, but we certainly encourage our teams to take that sort of moral underpinning of the corporation as a whole and make it their own. And so that's representative of our leadership model of empowerment at the lowest possible level in the organization, so that people are brought on board, they're given the trust, the tools, the resources, and hopefully the empowerment at the end of all of that to go forward and lead. And so in terms of determining culture, we're no different. We want them to figure out what that means to them and what it means and works best at the local level. An insurance business trading in London, right outside Lloyd's, is going to be much different than a car dealership in Medicine Hat, Alberta, or a construction site in northern BC. And so to think that we're going to be all things to all people and impose culture on them is an absolute failure. So we very much take a different worldview on that and want to empower people to figure it out.
And I love that notion of empowering them to figure it out and embodying whatever that local culture has likely already been there, right? And just continuing to embody it. But I'm also hearing that you do have core values that you would hope that all of your entities would uphold ultimately, right? What are values that you want to transmit to some of these local companies?
Yeah, so moral underpinnings, core values in the big sense in our group really haven't changed since the 1980s. It wasn't around at the time, and I'm not sure that they put any label of core values on them back in our foundational era. But what I would like to say is they've been in place for a very long time. They're take care of each other, have fun, be innovative, and build great things. And so that some of that language is very construction centric. However, I think it applies to just about everything that we're doing in any industry. And as you can see, they're pretty broad. They're very much geared towards moral underpinnings, with a lot of room for interpretation at the local level and empowerment for everyone to do that as local leaders. So we strongly believe in that. What we also encourage, though, is for each of our teams to think about what their individual core values are as well. And so, for instance, our corporate group, our holding company, would have a differently expressed set of core values that's unique to that team and the services and the things that they do. It's mostly legal, finance, business leader type people. They may have a slightly, different set of core values in terms of how they operate that mesh very well with those big, large-scale moral underpinnings.
I love it. And one of the things that we often do with clients has to do with developing shared commitments as a team. So every department, every team should develop some set of shared commitments, something that they're going to, I don't want to say rules of conduct because we're all adults and rules shouldn't really be a thing, but rather just here's what I'm going to commit to. And these are the kind of conducts I'm going to uphold in wanting to achieve the broader kind of commitment as a team, and really being clear on what are some of those commitments, what are some of those values that we want to make sure we're upholding as we navigate life within the work environment on a daily basis. And what I'm hearing from you is you're also encouraging some of these local entities so it's one thing to have these broader, I guess, concepts and moral underpinnings, but then how does that operationalize? How does that actually show up within our day to day? And I think that's often the missing link, where we creating these values, these cornerstone principles, is done as a checkbox exercise. Oh yeah, mission, vision, values. Yeah, we've got those. We're good. They're on the wall in the boardroom. But how does that actually show up? And helping people connect to how that shows up is really key to making sure that they are in fact working towards that broader purpose and working collectively towards these collective interests rather than focusing on their individual pursuits, right? At the end of the day.
That's right. I really believe in that, Lori. From my point of view, on our best days, we have volunteers. We don't have employees or subcontractors, any of that. Set compensation aside, obviously, people need, we're taking care of people and paying them for their time, no doubt, and rewarding them and so on. That's just table stakes. You can get that anywhere. What we want is an army of volunteers, people that show up because they're connected to some sort of purpose inside our organization or the part of our organization that they are a member of. And we want them to use that connection to be better than they otherwise would be and to make the team better than it otherwise would be, so that the component of all the individuals there, when put together, is like a force multiplier. And so that's, probably pretty easy to say in a podcast and pretty hard to accomplish consistently in the real world. So we work at it every single day. But certainly that's our view and that's our commitment. And we think that unleashing the talent in the people is what's going to move the organization forward, as opposed to any of the top-down management stuff or big, heavy core values or branding or any of that is prescribed upon them.
And I heard you throughout our conversation so far allude to empowering your leadership, empowering your local leadership, as well as just your local teams to take ownership and to figure out and to ebb and flow and figure out what their local mojo is within that. So what are some of the ways or some of the tools that you provide them to be able to, in fact, empower them so that they do feel empowered and they are inclined to actually figure that mojo out?
One of the things that's happened under my leadership, I guess, as CEO is a massive decentralization of our company. And so what used to have a big shared services model where we provided all sorts of services to our different divisions and so on has been pared back drastically. And all of that has been outsourced. The only things that we retain at the corporate level is finance, legal, and leadership development. And so leadership development is headed by a very talented executive. Laura, you've dealt with Laura and met Laura. She runs our programming. And what we want to do through that is bring together our people to give them the tools and the resources that it takes to develop their leadership and to climb the leadership pipeline, the ladder, right, towards whatever their end goal may be. And so in that, we've got an online university. We've got a high potential leaders program. We've got a bunch of other resources, including a library, both virtual and physical library, and a bunch of other training type events and resources that we provide at the corporate level for some, and then we disseminate out to our divisions as well, so that they can use them as they see fit at the local level in their businesses. And I'm happy to say that it functions well. And it's a growing part of our business. It is run by me per se, or the executive in our group. It is actually guided by a steering committee, which includes the heads of our various divisions, especially the largest ones with the largest concentrations of employees. So those presidents that work with me day to day that run the divisions are on that leadership development steering committee. And I mention that not because the boring governance is particularly interesting, but to really say that we have a strong commitment from the top leadership in our company to make that program real, to make it important, and to make it meaningful for people to get from A to B in their leadership journey.
Several things I want to touch on, and everything you just talked about. One, Laura, amazing. Yes, we did meet before, and she is incredibly progressive in her thinking. And the second thing I want to talk about is just kind of validation of a lot of what you've already shared in terms of empowering the local entities to really take ownership of their culture, of their people, of their leadership development as well. But rather than where a lot of companies will develop these projects, develop these programs, and then implement them. The flip I'm seeing on your side, and that's what one of the things that had really kind of I found remarkable when talking with Laura, is we're starting on the ground upwards. It's a bottom up approach where you guys are using and leveraging all of the local insights to be able to develop a program that is truly impactful and that is responsive to some of the needs and the gaps that you've heard are happening in the different lines of companies that you are, that form the group of company as well. But finally, the last piece I really want to touch on is the fact that you start with your leadership team and making sure that all of the leadership team is on board, that they are 150% behind this program, so that you can assure that they will model the behavior they seek in their team members. They will uphold and make it a priority and make sure that, because too often than not, a lot of these training and development programs are done again as a checkbox exercise to say, yeah, we invest in growth and development, but are we really seeing a positive change from some of these programs? And where we start to see that positive change is when we have our leadership team driving the momentum behind it, driving the importance of finishing these programs and actually bringing them to fruition, and then applying them and developing plans on where our priorities are from a competency standpoint for our leadership team. What are some of the competencies that are non-negotiable, but also how are we going to structure our programs, everything, our processes, to make sure that we are in fact nurturing and growing that type of competency within our ranks at all levels of the organization.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. You agree. Okay, good. We're on the same page. That's always a good thing when you think that we're on the same page. Now let's talk about, in your mind, I kind of alluded to competencies. What do you think make a good leader great? What are some of those attributes that make a good leader great?
I would say a commitment to lifelong learning. I mean, let's face it all, every leader's born, right? Their existence, they were born, but great leaders are built. And so that implies you're ever changing, ever growing, ever learning. And so my view on that is that the greatest leaders are always open to learn something. And of course, it's like the table stakes, right? You can do things like this and learn from it. You can read books and learn from it. You can listen to others and learn from it. But oftentimes the greatest teacher is experience. And don't deny the fact that each one of us are getting experience every single day. You can learn from those around you, and you can learn from your journey. It's not just about the stuff that's academic or in a vacuum or quite insulated from what I'll call the real world, right? I would say secondly, there's a mix of integrity, forward thinking, right, and competence that each leader has to have to be able to succeed. Again, those things are fairly easy to talk about, but really need to be demonstrated when the going gets tough, when the bullets are flying, when things do not sort of go according to plan on a day-to-day basis, which happens regularly. That consistency of those basic personal attributes to me are what's foundational to a great leader. At the end of the day, people sign up to win, in my view anyway. So they didn't come to work to screw up. They didn't come to work to see it not go well. But I think the inevitable truth is the world is imperfect, and so you're going to encounter difficulties. It's great when you don't, but we all know from life that things happen along the way. So the point I'm making is when you bring all of that together, those personal attributes, as well as the ability to learn from your mistakes or your shortcomings or your things that didn't go so well, and incorporate all of that into something that not only moves yourself ahead, but the people that follow you or that you work with moves them ahead as well. That's great leadership, or one of the ways great leadership shows up.
I absolutely agree. And I think it boils down to mindset as well, right? You talked about that continuous improvement mindset, understanding we're never done growing. We weren't put on the earth to stagnate. We were put on the earth to continuously evolve. But part of that evolution is to ensure that you're self-aware and ensure that you're open to realizing that nobody's perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. It's part of the journey, but understanding the importance of failing forward, saying, what have I learned from this? What went really well? what might have gone better? What am I going to do differently? So to your second point of that future focus, that forward focus of, okay, what am I going to do differently next time to ensure whatever challenge, roadblock showed up doesn't show up again? Because that pivot, that agility is in my control. The roadblock showing up, or whatever nature of roadblocks showing up, they're going to happen. It's inevitable. But how am I going to manage that? And I think, to your point of saying this on a podcast, super easy, absolutely, but actually embodying that and developing systems and developing ways of nurturing those mindsets within the workplace. That's the challenge right there, right?
In teaching others.
Yeah.
The best way to reinforce it is to teach others, right? Not only demonstrate that yourself, but demonstrate it to the point where you're able to teach others and have them learn from you or your experiences. That's super powerful and an exponential kind of leadership.
Absolutely. I like that propellant. It's like fuel for leveled up leadership right there, being able to teach it, being able to integrate it, being able to also create the environment that makes it acceptable to fail. You said we all sign up to win 100%. I think assuming positive intent, it's my way of seeing life in general. What if I were to see this, that it wasn't they didn't intentionally fail? How can I see this differently, right? But definitely people theoretically sign up to win, but then how can we normalize and help to foster that environment? What kind of practices might we be able to implement to ensure that people are, remaining accountable when they are non-successful, and then doing something about it? And the doing something about it is that differentiator, I think.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. One of the other things that I think is important, and you just touched on it, is positive intent. And I'm fond of the saying, accept the world as it is, not as you want it to be, especially if you want to change it. So many people in their leadership journey go and look outside themselves into the world, at other people or events or whatever, and assume the worst. Assume that somebody's out to get them, or that they have a negative intention, or that they are morally bankrupt, or they're dumb, or whatever, right? And all of those things, even if they were true, are way, way, way outside your control as a leader, as an individual, as a person. And you know what? Most of the time, people are probably pretty well intentioned. They're just trying to win in their own way. And if you can keep that in mind, have a thick skin, and try and figure that out, try and get to the bottom of how you find common ground, or what the problem is, or, all of those things. It's a lot less energy you've got to put into the leadership dynamic if you just start assuming that people have positive intentions and they want to win. Again, very easy to say, but tougher to do.
But one sentence that can help is, I've used this in conflict resolution all the time, is we're coming in at it with assumptions. You use the words assumptions. It's a beautiful word, and we all know what happens when we assume. And for those who don't, just Google and you'll quickly get a nice little analogy there. But at the end of the day, we're coming in with assumptions. But if we were able to check those assumptions, assume positive intent, and actually ask this one sentence, help me understand your perspective. We're clearly coming at this from different angles. Help me understand your perspective. That
Absolutely.
changes it from defend your position to let's try and find some, you used common ground. Absolutely. Let's find some common ground here. Let's figure out where there is alignment and start building from there, because that's where there's opportunity to kind of figure out resolution.
Absolutely. And to me, the personal discipline that goes in that, the bottom rung of the leadership ladder is self-leadership. And in that, there's like a little circle, right? There's like thought, feeling, action, outcome. And so the thought is like, hey, I saw something in the world. The feeling is how you feel about it. You probably can't control what you see and how you feel about it. But in between each of those things, there's a choice. So you kind of round the bend. So you got a thought, you got a feeling, right? An observation, and then, some feelings about it. Then you got a choice. Then you go to action and outcome. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand back as a pragmatic observer and say, oh, okay, I see this. And yes, I realized, it may be bad over here, but I'm going to assume the best, and I'm going to work through it, and I'm going to check my own stuff, right? And I'm going to, explore this with some level of curiosity. I'm going to look at it and say, hey, why is this way? How can we find alignment? et cetera, et cetera. Again, the ultimate goal is that word alignment, which I just said, right? It's the piece in the middle. If you got vision and you got execution, right? Connecting your dream to reality, the piece in the middle is alignment. That's where you can't starve your leadership. And so to gain the alignment, you have to be able to exert the self-control that allows you, the self-leadership, to show up and actually get through that conversation or whatever, that alignment exercise, which is really where all the value is created. And so if you get people in my experience, and I'm no expert here, but if you get people in my experience that can find that alignment, that's true empowerment, because you're able to connect the vision, as I've said, to the execution, the alignment in the middle, and the empowerment, the tools, the resources, and the permission to go and do it is where your volunteers show up.
That's how you create the volunteer squad. Absolutely. 100%. I want to come back to when you said, check your stuff. You're explaining those, the thought, the feelings, and everything that happens in between. And what happens in between is often relevant to your stuff, is your past experiences, your past disappointments, your own assumptions, your own perceptions, and that can all come in skew. But if you're able to interrupt that thought process, if you're able to pause it and remove those filters and say, how might I see this differently? So that person who is talking over you in a meeting, where right away, based on, the thought is this person is talking over me, the feeling is they're trying to overpower me right away. You've made that assumption. You've decided they're trying to overpower me because they want to win. But if you're able to reframe that piece, that thought, you can check your stuff, check those past filters, those past disappointments, those past experiences, maybe with this individual where you've witnessed them do it to someone else, and you're already decided that that's where they're going with this again. If you're able to interrupt that and reframe it with, why do they feel the need? I'm using a really random example here. Why do they feel the need to talk over other people right now? What might that be about? We're not feeling heard. They might have said something and it was kind of skidded over, and now they've went into their knee-jerk reaction. The true power, the superpower as a leader, is to have that level of self-awareness and have that ability to reframe that thought to directly correlate with a more positive, productive response and action.
Win-win.
And of course, I'm going to sound biased as a mediator. I that's always what we strive for when I do some of the conflict resolution stuff. We want to figure out that common ground, but we see it repeat so often. And you also alluded to, when we're feeling overwhelmed and depleted, understand, listeners, that when you are feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling depleted, or when you've got, a firing squad coming at you, your ability to check your stuff, your ability to reframe and pause and to take your time will be that much less likely. So you need to be hyper aware in those moments to make sure that you're truly, truly able to maintain that level of self-control and self-awareness in the midst of all those changes, or the midst of all those, competing priorities, if you will. But the more that if you're not taking care of your own self too, to that point, your own mental health, that self-care piece, if there's any depletion in any sphere of your person, you're going to be that much less likely to be able to maintain that level of self-control.
That's exactly it, Lori.
Yeah. It's the whole, I know it's cheesy, but putting your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
Something as silly as food intake for me. If I don't eat, I am 100% a hangry person. I can get from 0 to 60 if I've not maintained my food levels. I know I need to eat regularly now. I know this, especially if it's a more stressful period of time, there's crazy business meetings, I need to keep snacks close. It's so silly, but because if I don't eat regularly, then I'm likely going to misinterpret some conversations or say things that I'm going to regret.
That's right.
It'll be the blood sugar speaking, not me. Just say it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an acceptable excuse.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Oftentimes there's lots of good books that sort of draw out leadership progression as a set of stairs, right? It's like a pipeline. You arrive at your one level as leader of yourself. Then you're a leader of others. Then you're a leader of a team. Then you're a leader of a business. Then you're a leader of an enterprise, and on and on and on. Well, that's all fine. And there's good works in there. I kind of look at it like a concentric circle. It's kind of like leadership of yourself is in the middle, and then it gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger at each level. But what's always at the middle? Leadership of yourself. So if that means you need to eat more often, great. You know it. You deal with it. If you gotta, like me, if you gotta go to the gym every day, go to the gym every day. Like those are valid leadership
Mhm.
strategies. It's not just about, hey, I'm going to try and ask some questions so I don't rip somebody's head off in the meeting today. Maybe you got to look a little further back the chain and ask, why would you even think of that? Why would that be a reaction? Oh yeah, I'm hungry, or I need to go to the gym, or I haven't spent enough time on
Yeah,
myself, or I'm not reading enough, or I'm influenced by something else. All of those things are external factors that are like table stakes when you get out of bed in the morning in terms of showing up as a human, right? That's self-leadership. And to me, it begins at that level every day. It's not like you just master that and then it's like, oh, I'm good now. No, no, no. This is like a lifetime journey. And so as you get good at each circle, it gives you permission to move on, right? The world will allow you to move on to bigger and better things. And hopefully, if you're if
absolutely.
you're if you're exhibiting the qualities, you've got some people that are coming with you that can sort of advance along with you, because that's really the speed limit on the highway. Each one of us wants to advance and use our skills and do new and interesting things. Well, the only way you can do that is if somebody is doing what you're doing today, tomorrow. And you have to build those people. That's the speed limit on the
Exactly.
highway. That's the win-win, right?
Absolutely. 100%. Wow, great insights from a leadership perspective, Chuck. You've shared so many kind of nuggets of wisdom. When it comes to your people, again, navigating just the complexities, and it was really helpful the way you described that. And I'm kind of looping all the way back to the beginning of our conversation here. But the way you described the importance of, from a group of companies, understanding that it shouldn't we don't want to be imposing a worldview. It's more, let's give you some tools, let's empower you we'll give you those foundational moral underpinnings that we expect. And I think honestly, the ones you mentioned they should transcend any industry, as well as they should be part of pretty much every organization's moral underpinnings. They're just common sense, I suppose, but also they really kind of set the stage for success. And then allowing your local companies to figure out what operationally, what they want to focus on, what their priority is, and how they want to align to that, and starting with your people and helping them determine how they want to align to those broader moral underpinnings. What is, inevitably, the nature and, of course, the way you've described the historical context of your company has involved a number of acquisitions and mergers and all these kinds of things where you're taking over. I don't want to say take over. That's kind of really against everything we've just talked about, but where you're bringing in these additional companies as a means of just growing your reach and growing your impact on the world. What are some of the challenges you have encountered from a people perspective when it comes to that entire kind of approach and business model?
Great question. So much of our business today has been acquired in some way, either from organic startup or adding on to something that we've purchased, or just M&A activity where we have purchased the business. So this is really relevant in our world. What we understand, and what the traditional wisdom says, if you learn in business school, the value of an acquisition is won or lost in the integration. And so the integration of accounting systems and integration of the corporate legal or whatever in the background, that's the easy part compared to the integration of the people, and most importantly, the culture. And so knowing that the value game is going to be won or lost in that exercise in the hearts and minds of the people, that's a major focus for us in terms of understanding what that is pre-buy. So through the due diligence process, assessing whether there is a fit there or not, and then understanding the quality of the leadership that we have inside that organization, the target, as you'd call it, right? To know what has to be dealt with, and what barriers there might be, or success points in future around integration. It can be super simple, right? You may have a group of employees, let's say, that believe their benefit plan is going to go away or be worse because of the acquisition, or that their friend is no longer going to be employed, or the lunchroom is moving or not going to exist, or whatever, right? It's not always the big picture. Sometimes it's very local to the individual. uncovering that as early as possible and understanding that is really, really important. And quite honestly, I mean, you have to protect the culture. So it's kind of like life over limb, right? If you have to part with some people through that process, do it early. Do it before it becomes a cancer in the organization and it gets beyond your control or destroys that value. You have to protect the whole, sometimes at the cost of some people that don't fit on the team.
And that is 100% valid. I agree that it takes one bad leader or one even bad individual team member to literally become a cancer within a team, within a culture. I've spoken with a CEO of another group of companies at one point. No, it wasn't a group of companies. They had just acquired a new business. And it was really an interesting conversation because you said the importance of safeguarding culture, that local culture. But what would you do? And have you ever encountered, I guess my question is, a local culture which is completely toxic? So in terms of measuring, I imagine part of your needs assessment, it involves starting to gauge and measure how people are currently feeling. What are some of the issues, people-related issues that are currently at play? Well, has it ever happened where you've landed on you're acquiring a company that has a completely toxic culture? And how have you navigated that?
Yes. So in general, we want to buy things that have a high functioning culture that are not particularly broken in that regard. Don't always get it right. We like to leave those intact, and to the point where we'll even leave the brand on the business. We have many, many, many different brands inside our overall organization. And so that sort of starts, right, the identity of the organization and so on. We don't want to go in there and impose a bunch of change unless it's necessary. And so, yes, we have encountered that. We would like to think that our due diligence would tell us that early on, and that we just don't make the acquisition. Like, that's how important it is. If the culture is not good and the leadership is not good, we're not going to buy it. Yeah, we won't invest in it. That is just, it can be endless hell trying to deal with that from a business perspective, and you're going to probably lose as a result, right? The value is going to go. If we don't get it right every time, and there's always little elements of things that need to change over time. And so parting with the toxic people is important, right? Obviously, you're not going to go in day one and get rid of a whole bunch of people, but identifying early on where the areas of misalignment might be, work hard to gain that alignment. If it's not going to happen, move on. Help that person find something that they can align with and use their talents in a different way for the good of all. So that's first and foremost. Secondly to that is curiosity. There may be, again, you're coming from the outside, right? When you acquire a business, it doesn't mean that you have all the answers or you necessarily have to be right. Paint a vision, ask for the alignment in the middle, and explore the areas where you're not aligned with curiosity. Figure out why that is. Maybe there's actually some validity there. It's something you can learn, right? You oftentimes buy other businesses because they have something different or new or whatever, right? Don't look past that because your own ego says you have to be right. Maybe you can learn something from these folks. And you can carry that forward. And we've got lots of stories where ideas have come from that type of environment and changed our entire organization, which is really amazing. Cool. That's exactly why you do that. So those are a few ways. I think the third point to make on that topic, just briefly, Lori, is really to say that turnover is not always a bad thing in an organization, and in particular when you're working through mergers and acquisitions. Having people sign up for a lifetime of employment is a pretty antiquated model. I think everybody has lots of choices, and there's lots of very, very intelligent people out there who have a lot to contribute. And so what we want is the fit, and hopefully that's a long-term fit. But for as long as it can be, we would like those individuals to join our team. And so we're not going to beg people to stay forever. And if it's toxic and it's not working, no hard feelings. Let's move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if it's more it'll be more detrimental to keep them on board against there's that misalignment, working always against the grain, than it would be to set them up for success elsewhere and to understand that it's okay. And that we're not striving. I like what you said there. It is an antiquated model. It is no longer the reality. People are no longer lifers per se, and sticking around accepting, a toxic culture because at least I have a job. That's not the reality of our world of work today. Our world of work is that 1 in 4 people are already shopping for that next opportunity because there is that growth mindset at play.
That's so correct, Lori. And so many leaders in the past, and I hear some of them today, stand up and basically promise people a job for life and we're a family and all this other stuff. That's fine messaging. Anyone can deliver that. That's all fine. But to me, those are things you're never going to deliver on. You have no chance of delivering on those as a leader. The job for life thing is subject to all sorts of risks, and it's a two-way street. Most people come from a family. Some of that is good. Some of it is not good. You don't know what that means to that individual. And, it's pretty hard to fire your mom, but unfortunately in the work world, people get terminated, right? You're going to break a whole bunch of promises saying those things from the past that were very well-meaning, but in today's terms, don't apply.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some amazing suggestions and just amazing advice, folks, on helping to navigate some of those unique challenges that comes with acquisitions when it comes from a people perspective. But I think if I were to wrap them all up into some higher level kind of recommendations, I was hearing, have a strategy, be intentional, take the time to figure out do your due diligence, figure out whether or not there is fit and alignment rather than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Make sure that you're only acquiring those that have, maybe they don't 100% align today, but there appears to be potential to get them into aligning with the rest of us. Make sure that you're approaching it with curiosity, that you are, if they're not doing things a certain way before kind of kiboshing that way, understand that perspective, understand the value of doing it their way. And you'd be surprised at how many better ways, more efficient ways you can uncover along the path of curiosity. And from what you were just saying, it in fact happened. Many of your transformative kind of processes and practices have come from the companies that you have acquired. And finally, making sure that you remain agile, my French came out there, that you're continuously pivoting and continuously keeping tabs on your people, that you're just being intentional at the end of the day with everything you do. Thank you, Chuck, for joining us. Thank you. I was hoping I summarized it accurately.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. Thank you, Lord. Pleasure.
Amazing. If people want to continue connecting with you, how might they go about doing that? What's the best way to learn more about your companies, as well as if they're interested, maybe they're interested to be part of this empowering kind of culture, what would that next step look like to connect with JV Driver Group?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect through our website, jvdriver.com. You can certainly find my contact information there. Social media through LinkedIn is another really effective way to communicate and get connected with me as well. And then any of our other leaders. So it's not just about me. We have many leaders who have a profile in the community, in the business community, and many of them are smarter than me. So certainly you can reach out to any one of them. And again, you'll see most of them on the website or links to our portfolio websites.
Perfect. Thank you. Listeners, as I say in every episode, we've shared a bunch of insights, some tips, some recommendations. I hope that you're able to, at the very least, take one down and then decide one action you can make relevant to implementing that more in your life, and go do that.
Thanks, Lori.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guest, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.